So it's a gorgeous day and the sun is out. At this time of year, it's important to stay hydrated, but also your plants need hydrating. So today, I'm going to share with you my 5 top watering tips. So tip 1 is knowing when to water. So the topsoil here is as dry as you like. But do these plants really need watering or not? Now it will depend on the type of plant that you actually got growing. Things like salad crops or peas and beans and things like that have got quite shallow roots, so their roots don't go down too far. But things like these strawberry plants, their roots are much more extensive and go further down. So how do I know if this bed needs watering? Now I could use the old method, which is just to drill a hole, put your finger in there, see if it comes out. There you can see it's nice moist soil coming out of my hands. So I know that although the top inch or so of this soil is dry, bone dry, underneath there is moisture, so these plants don't need any watering. Or alternatively you can use the sort of bamboo stick or skewer or chopstick method. We just take the stick, push it down into where you think the depth of the roots will be, pull it out and just feel the stick, and you'll feel that that's moist under there. These plants don't need watering, although it might feel like the ground is dry. They don't actually need watering. If you overwater your plants, it's as bad as not giving them water at all. If you overwater them, the soil will be saturated with water. They won't have the air that they need for the roots, and you'll get poor growth. Now you could just go around with your stick, or you could just leave these sticks in place at the right root depth, and then when you come around to do your watering, just pull them out, give them a feel, see if they're dry or if they're wet. If they are wet, you don't need to water. If they're dry, you need to give them more water, and next we'll talk about how to water them. Now I see a lot of people with their watering cans going like this, seeing that the topsoil is wet and moving on. Now all you've done there is you've dampened down the topsoil and the top inch that was already dry anyway. And when it's a nice hot sunny day, that's just going to evaporate off and it's never going to make it down into the actual soil. So what you want to do is if the surface is dry and you're getting a lot of runoff, yeah, go around first of all and just give it a light watering just to dampen that topsoil. But then once you've actually got the soils like that, go round, give it a good soaking. You want that water to get all the way down. Yeah, give it a good old soaking through. Yeah, that way the water is going to get down into the soil below. That means actually you'll end up watering more on one day, but the other days of the week you just don't have to water at all. So the key to watering a lot of plants is to make sure that you water lots but less frequently. You're better off giving them a good douse of water every 3 days than you are trying to just give them a little bit of a sprinkling every day. If you give them a little bit of a sprinkling every day, that water is never going to make it down into the root system. If you give them a good soaking, that gives the water a chance to get down, the plants to absorb that water, the soil to dry out a little bit to allow the air and everything else around those roots to actually help them grow, and you won't end up waterlogging the plants. So key to watering is more water but less frequently. And where you've got plants that you're growing, you can obviously sprinkle over the top. But if you've got individual plants like brassicas or anything else, take your rows off. You can get the water right down at the root and just pull it around the actual root and where the stem's coming up through the soil instead of spraying all over the plants. Now people just say, oh, don't water when it's sunny because you'll scorch the leaves. There isn't much scientific evidence to actually say you actually scorch leaves. Very often what you see on leaves where they've been watered and it's dried off is residue. We live in quite a lime scaly area and you'll get the lime scale and bits developing on the leaves. So you're not going to harm your plants by actually watering over the top when it's sunny. But as I say, if possible, get it right down into the roots. You're just using less from evaporation. And that brings me on to point number 3, when to water. Now, It's best to water in the mornings if you possibly can. It avoids all the actual evaporation during the hot of the day. If you water late in the evening, the chances are that the leaves and the soil will still be wet. That encourages disease and pests when it cools down overnight. So try to water as early in the morning as you possibly can. As I say, if you don't get that until sort of later on in the day, that's fine, but try and avoid watering very late in the evening. That way that any slugs and anything else, you're just creating a lovely environment for when the weather cools off and the sun's gone down. You've got nice moist soil, you've got nice moist leaves, they're going to just chomp away on those. So try and get your watering in as early as possible. And to help retain some of that water that's actually you've put on, put a mulch on. Something like some bark chippings or some dried grass and vegetation on top of your beds. That means that the water you've put in there will soak down through and less chance of it evaporating out. So anything will do, or if you've got like sort of like bark chippings or grass clippings or any other type of mulch just over the surface of the soil, that will just help retain that salt moisture in the soil for longer and stop the evaporation process coming up. So number 4, clever strategies. Now there's some clever strategies that you can use to actually maintain as much water retention in your pots and in your beds as possible. Now one of those is down with what we've done with our potatoes. So down here on the potatoes, you'll see that what we've got is these black buckets, and they'll really absorb the heat and actually sort of heat up during the day and actually make the moisture go away. So what we've done is we've grouped them all together and put them as close as possible to each other, and kept them in some bark down at the bottom. So if you've got any pots in your garden or anything else, pull them all together into a big group of pots. That way there's less surface area exposed to the sun and there's less chance of evaporation coming off of those. In the greenhouse we use capillary matting. So we're not watering over the top, we're just putting water in here, and if you set up the capillary mattings with a little bit of a water reservoir and matting going from the reservoir into the actual capillary matting area where we've got capillary matting under these trays, that water will get dragged across into these, and they'll always have some water down at the bottom where the roots are, and despite the actual plants looking quite dry on top, they're still getting plenty of water underneath and everything that the roots need. So we use capillary matting in all our trays. It means we can bottom water things, you're not getting evaporation from the top, and the roots are just getting exactly what they need. Here in the polytunnel we use oyas. Now these pots are just terracotta pots that have got a cork in the bottom of them to stop the water draining out, and what happens is the water goes into there, and then the terracotta pot gets wet, and then the water slowly leaches its way into the actual soil all around, and then we just keep that covered over with a little tray pot bottom to actually keep the water in there. So that's one way we can maintain the moisture in this bed. When the bed's wet enough and wetter than the terracotta pot, you won't get any of this water going in, but once the actual soil starts to dry out a little bit, it will suck the actual moisture out of the pot and into the soil. The other thing you can do is put small plastic pots into the actual ground, and instead of actually watering the actual top surface, just fill those up with water, and that water will then slowly go down into the actual soil, right down at the root level where it's actually needed, rather than all around the plants where it's just going to wet this soil and evaporate off. The other thing you can do is use shade cloths. We use shade cloths in the greenhouse to keep it cool, but you can, if it gets particularly hot, putting up any type of material around your crops will just keep the hotness of the sun off of them, and then actually it can be just a little bit of fleece or anything else on a really, really hot day. It also helps just maintain some of that moisture into the soil. So lastly, let's talk about pots, whether it be a small pot like this or a large pot with a plant in it. Now, this has got dry compost in it, and you'll see what happens when I put water onto dry compost. As you can see, it just runs all the way through and straight out again. That's because dry compost and dry soil is very hydrophobic in that it won't absorb any of the actual water that's going in there. It will just drain all the way through. So to keep hold of your pots Two strategies: either give them a little bit of a light watering like we did with the beds, just to actually wet the topsoil and then water them again, or use some sort of plant tray so that the water will actually run through. The water will sit in the tray and then the soil can absorb it at its own pace. Alternatively, you can get hold of these little dripper systems. Now, most of them fit some sort of type of bottle. Just put the bottle on there, turn it over, put it in the soil, turn the tap on a little bit, and then just let it slowly drip out of the water bottle. That way, it's a bit of a small pot for it, but that way it's slowly dripping onto the soil, and that's giving it the opportunity for the actual soil to absorb some of that moisture and actually soak it up before it drains all the way through. So be particularly careful with your pots. Pots are really prone to drying out, especially if you've got terracotta pots or metal pots in hot weather. If you've got that and you like the look of terracotta and you love the look and I understand the aesthetics of it, maybe consider actually repotting your plants into plastic pots and put the plastic pots inside the metal container or the terracotta container, and that way they'll retain more moisture. Terracotta naturally will leach any moisture out through its surface. Metal will get really, really hot during the day with the sun on it, which will boost the temperatures up and make the evaporation process even faster. So consider putting plastic pots inside your decorative pots, and that will just help retain a little bit more moisture. So that is my 5 top tips for making sure that you get your plants nicely watered and they survive through the hot weather. So let's quickly run through those again. 1, know when to water. Make sure you test your soil at the root depth that the plants are at to make sure they actually need the moisture and you're not drowning them. 2, water more but less frequently. So give them a really good soaking when you do water, but don't do it so often. 3, water early in the morning to avoid leaving your soil and your leaves damp in the evenings and during the hot weather in the day when you're going to lose loads of evaporation, and use mulches and grass clippings or anything else just to cover the soil, just to maintain and keep that moisture locked into the soil. 4thly, use little strategies like oyers. As I say, we already mentioned the mulch. Use plastic pots in the ground so you can get the water down at the level that it's needed. Use capillary matting so you're bottom watering your seedlings when you're not top watering and letting all the water evaporate off before the roots have got a chance to get it. And 5thly, look after your pots. Pots are really susceptible to drying out, so with pots it's no good just going out there and giving them a massive great big jug of water. What you need to do is you need to give them a little bit of water slowly, then come back a little bit later on, give them a little bit more once the moisture's got into the pot. As I say, pots will notoriously dry out, and once a pot is completely dried out, it is really hard to get it rehydrated. You really need to get those pots and you need to stand them in some reservoir of water or something like that, or use a dripper system that's dripping over a reasonable amount of time to actually get that soil to rehydrate, because for a long time it will be this hydrophobic state where it will just let water flow straight off of it. So keep your plants alive, happy watering, and I will see you again next time. Cheerio.